This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Black Kia Studios.
Oh, what a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
Game Night here on 97.3 ESPN. Flyers win in overtime. It was a roller coaster game. You heard it all right here on 97.3 ESPN. Without further ado, we're going to get into it right now. Also, it's a Weinberg Wednesday coming up. Less than 30 minutes from now is Dave Weinberg to talk some about the Eagles. We got a lot to get to in a short amount of time here on Game Night. And joining us now to talk about the Flyers is Kevin Durso, our 97.3 ESPN.com Flyers insider, and Flyers coverage on 97.3 ESPN is being brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now and they'll match your first deposit up to $250. Go to PlaySugarHouse.com and win real money with their sportsbook along with casino games from the comfort of your home. Must be 21 or older to play. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. It felt like, Kevin, the Flyers were gambling with everybody's emotions the way that game went. How are you doing after that overtime win?
Better than I was at the end of regulation, I'll tell you that much.
So let's go through the ebb and flow of that game before we get to the overtime. It felt like the Flyers came out on a mission in that first period, and I don't think it was a coincidence that all three of the goals scored against Varlamov were on the right side of him, and it seemed like that might have been a weak point for him tonight.
Yeah, it definitely was, and that was exactly the first period I was looking for from this team. You needed to make a statement, you needed to set the tone, and you needed your big players and your best players to come out and be the best. And Kevin Hayes comes out, it's a goal 2 minutes into the game. That's the right way to start. He gets another one. And then Sean Couturier with a great individual effort to give you a 3-0 lead. Those are the guys that I was looking to see perform, and that was the type of first period I wanted to see. And they really executed well in that first period. They set the tone for the game, and it set them up and put them in a position to win the game. And obviously it was, as playoff hockey can be, it was a roller coaster ride from there, but they were able to finish the job, luckily for them, because it would be a very different reaction if they didn't finish this game off.
When you look at the difference, though, between what we saw at the beginning of the game and then what happened in the third period, at least in my eyes, it looked like they went from a super focused, aggressive team to a team that, frankly, lost their discipline and got a little out of focus at times.
Yeah, and, during the third period, I thought for probably about 7-8 minutes of the third period, they were doing exactly what you expect them to do. They killed off the rest of a penalty. They were really limiting the opportunities. I think the Islanders had one shot on goal for most of it. And all of a sudden, they continued to sit back. They let the Islanders press a little bit. The Islanders forced them into mistakes, and they made some undisciplined mistakes as well. And it led to opportunities. I mean, honestly, as I'm looking at that game-tying goal by Pajot, it's Travis Sanheim standing behind the net with all sorts of time, and all you have to do is just find a way to get it up and out. I mean, there's not too much to it. And I understand what he was trying to do by making a play along the boards. That's the right call. But you could probably take it out from behind your net a little bit and use that time and space to your advantage and see what opens up, see if there's an opportunity to get out, because there was a battle between two players right there along the blue line, and that can lead to a keep, that can lead to an opportunity. Obviously, by that point, a lot of the rest of the Flyers had broken out, and it left Pajot wide open, and he's not going to miss from that spot. He's that talented, and that's why the Islanders picked him up at the trade deadline. So there's got to be better execution, especially down the stretch. It felt like as that game wore on, the moment that second goal was a big game changer for me too, because for most of it, even as the Islanders started to press, you were getting the performance. It was, time starting to wind down and they need 2 goals. And they get that one with about just under 9 minutes to go. And there was way too much time left for them. They had more than enough life at that point in time, and you knew you had to play a perfect game from there, and they didn't. So that's why the Islanders found a way to tie the game. And good for them to come back out and definitely look like the more energized team when overtime started and more motivated to get the job done, because at that point, as that third period wound down, they were not the team motivated to win the game, and the Islanders nearly could have taken that game before they even had a shot.
Flyers insider for 97.3 ESPN.com, Kevin Durso, joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Make sure you're following Kevin on Twitter at Kevin_Durso for your Flyers and NHL playoff coverage. looking at that game as well, and I'm not trying to be hyper judgmental, but it felt like a couple of the goals, again, another situation where you have a team scoring on Carter Hart, and it just didn't feel like it was all Carter Hart's fault. I thought there were the 2 of the 3 goals against him were situations that the Flyers actually could have avoided, Kevin.
Yeah, definitely the third goal for sure. And the first one's a tough one for him to stop, and that's a power play goal. The second one is a little bit of it's one that you want him to have back for sure. I mean, he absolutely needs to try to come up with a big save there for you. It's a give and go off of a rush. You really need to have something, you need to stop there. And that might have stopped some of the bleeding too. I mean, that's the goal that really gives the Islanders a lift in that third period because they hadn't found a way to solve them yet to that point with the exception of the one power play opportunity. And now they could really see their 5-on-5 game coming to life. And that's where they gain the motivation. But I thought that in the moments following both of those goals, Carter Hart played well, and he did his job from there too, because, I mean, there were a couple different times where the Islanders could have tied that game. They could have ended it. At one point in time, I tweeted, Anders Lee probably could have had 4 goals in this game. He was that good. And he was, I'm not going to lie, he was my pick to end this thing in overtime because I just thought he had the touch. And luckily for the Flyers, and good for them actually, that on his brief opportunities that he had in overtime to see the ice, he didn't get a sniff of the net. And that's credit to them for coming out motivated again, like I said. So that was a good way for them to finish it off, but they need more from everybody so that it doesn't always fall back on whether or not Carter Hart made a save, no matter how good the opportunity is for the Islanders, that it makes it seem like it's impossible for him to stop. You just got to try to prevent those more often and really take away the front of the net for this team, because as soon as they get there, they find a way.
Yeah, I felt that there was at least 2 or 3 other times that it felt like the Flyers just missed some scoring opportunities for the Islanders. If I could just play devil's advocate with you with the power play goal, and this was just my little watching the game, I felt like that tonight, this afternoon, I should say. I keep thinking the game's at night, but it's the afternoon. But the power play goal, you have a guy camping out in front of your goaltender. And I'm watching this game, and I feel like every time the Flyers have someone go near the Islanders goaltender, there's someone pushing him, poking him, nudging him, getting a little physical with the guy near the front of the net. Whereas you have a guy who ends up in front of Carter Hart, and nobody's there to even give him a little, bump or anything.
Yeah, on that particular one where they did score the goal, I mean, I think that part of the problem there is that something happens so quickly. They get set up so quickly there. It takes them only 17 seconds to score, that you're not able to establish your foundation for the penalty kill at that time. It was also it was their first power play of the game too at that point, so it's not an area that both sides have had a lot of work on in the last couple of days. So the space was there. The Islanders took advantage of it, and the Flyers really never had time to get set up. It is something you need to improve, though, and I think that's an area not just on the penalty kill, but at 5-on-5 as well, that you need to account for. You need to make sure that your goaltender is protected, that there's not guys getting in the crease around him and getting those opportunities from in close, because both teams are going to thrive off of that one way or the other. If it goes, if the Flyers have guys around the net, they can find a way to score from there too. And obviously the Islanders have proven that they can score when they get guys down there like that. So that's an area you need to clean up, whether it's on the penalty kill or at 5-on-5. I think you just need guys to be even more physical and more, it's a little bit tough when you have a lot of young guys in the lineup that aren't as battle tested in the playoffs. But, I do think that guys like Phil Myers have embraced that part of the game. You just can't have that guy out there all the time. And when you don't, it could end up costing you if the guy who's out there in his place isn't as physical as he is and not clearing the front of the net like he is. So that's probably where you need to clean that area up. You just need to keep guys out of that area because they will take advantage. They're a hungry team when they get in front of the net, and that's really the bottom line with the Islanders.
Speaking of power plays, the Flyers again go for Oper on the power play, 0 for 2 today. What did you see from the power play, and why are they still having trouble scoring?
On the first one, I didn't think it was terrible. They had some good movement, but again, I think they're still looking for perfection. And you can't look for perfection against teams. They couldn't look for it against Montreal, and they can't look for it against the Islanders either. You've got to just try to go hard to the net and find a way to get the puck to the net. That's the real simple approach to it. You just got to be able to do those things. And while the Flyers, I think, had better possession, especially from the top unit on that first power play, especially after they had scored a goal early in the game, I don't think that from there I saw much. The second unit looked terrible on that power play. And then after that, again, you get an early one in the second period, and this is before the Islanders really had a chance to start to play their game. The problem I have with the second one is that it was kind of a gift power play. Here's Ross Johnston, who is known as their big tough guy on that fourth line, and he goes and gets a little bit too aggressive trying to get into it with a couple of guys and gets called for roughing. You have an opportunity there to really put your foot down and really show all the authority in the world on this game. And you didn't take advantage of it, and slowly but surely you saw how the Islanders built off of that penalty kill, where they get some momentum out of that. They get one goal and they get their power play opportunity. And there was a really, really big chance that this game could have turned into a game that was won or lost, depending on which side you're on, with special teams. There was a really big chance of that, and the Flyers are lucky to have survived it in this one. They're going to have to continue to work on things on the power play because they need to get it going. It was good to see some of the guys who are on that power play get some success at 5-on-5, but they really need to get it going on the power play because these opportunities, they had one power play well after the game was decided in game one. They had two today. If it's not obvious by now, they're going to have few opportunities on the power play in this series, more than likely. So you've got to take advantage of the ones you do get because they could change the game.
Flyers win in overtime 4-3 over the Islanders thanks to the goal by Phil Myers. Let's talk about Myers again. I mean, this guy seems to keep coming up with these big goals. And honestly, Kevin, I never really thought of him as a goal-scoring defenseman, but it almost feels like he's turning into that guy.
He's got some offensive prowess, no question about it. I mean, he's not going to light the world on fire with his offensive numbers, but he's got some ability for sure. And for him, I love that he's the type of guy who scores this goal because he's going to get fired up about it. He's a very emotional player, and he's worked really hard to get to where he is. This is as big of a goal as he's scored in his career, obviously, to this point. He's still a young player, but he's worked really hard as an undrafted free agent, having to prove everything at every step of the way of his journey to get to the NHL, and now he's got a playoff overtime goal. And so what a lift for him. I'm sure it's a lift for the rest of the team, too, because they'll feel good that he contributed in that way. And it was awesome to see. Honestly, it was a great way to really put a wrap on the game because it looked like Sean Couturier was going to score moments before that. And it was a really good block in front of the net that prevented it from happening. But I credit Couturier a lot after that because he did stay with the play. And, I talked earlier when I was on the Sports Bash this afternoon before the game that, frustration was starting to set in with some of these guys. And that's a moment where, and I don't know if it's, if Couturier scoring in the first period has anything to do with it, but maybe if you're still not getting anything, that's a moment where you put your head to the sky and let the frustration set in, and maybe the play is over after that. Couturier stayed with it, gets the puck back to the blue line. That's where Myers is waiting. There was a lane there, and you had the Islanders a little bit out of sorts from that because they just cleaned up the area in front of the net, and now here comes a shot from a distance that's through some traffic, and it beats Thomas Greiss, who had done a great job in relief at that point. To that point. So really good effort there on that play to keep it going, to not let that near miss get the better of them, and within seconds afterwards they had the win. And it's a big one because now that they're back even in the series, they've announced their presence in a couple of ways in this one. And while the Islanders did an admirable job of erasing that deficit and really looked like they could have taken this game, the Flyers come away with a win, and a win is a win in the playoffs. And now you can move on to Game 3 and set your focus on that.
We'll get to the goaltender situation for the Islanders in just a couple of minutes, but I want to ask you before we get to that about the change that you guys talked about on the Sports Bash before the show, which was Haig in, Gostisbehere out, JVR in, Lawton out. So I want to ask you, what did you see from Haig and JVR today?
I thought Haig looked as good as he normally does in these situations. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he's the best defenseman on the ice all the time. That's not typically the case. But there was just something about the way that Justin Braun plays alongside of him where there's more of a calmness because I think they understand each other's styles better or they know what to expect from each other. And Braun was more active on the offensive side as a result of that. It's definitely... It looks like a better fit for the Flyers. I think they just look better overall when Robert Haig's in the lineup, and it's not meant to be a knock on Shane Gostisbehere, but every time he seems to take that step forward with a good game, the next game doesn't replicate that success, and you make this change, and you bounce back from whatever happened and have a better showing. Then you get, in JVR's case, I liked his energy, all things considered. I thought he had a solid game. I don't think he did anything super spectacular, but I also don't see a reason why he should come back out of the lineup. I definitely think he provided some good energy, was pretty decent on the forecheck, all things considered, and you need guys to really put in the effort. So I think that having somebody like that who's fresh and who's sat out a few games could be a benefit. I'm curious to see what happens with tomorrow's lineup, because I really would like to see and figure out more about whether or not Scott Lawton was a coach's choice for this departure from the lineup, or if there's something else going on beneath the surface here and that he might be unfit to play in some capacity. But we'll find out more about that, I'm sure, in the coming hours. Alain Vigneault's talking about it, I'm sure. And not only that, but I think tomorrow as the day builds up, we'll find out more as well about his status and whether or not that was just a decision to keep him out. And if it was just a coach's decision, I not only expect him to come back in, but I expect him to be very motivated, because they could use a guy like that for the two-way play in situations like the third period if you're protecting a lead. So I think that he's got a really good shot of getting back into the lineup for Game 3.
Before we touch on Game 3 tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, right here on 97.3 ESPN, the coverage begins. I wanted to ask you one more thing about today's Flyers win. Flyers won, but they lost the face-off battle. I don't even remember the last time the Flyers didn't win the face-off battle. So, how did the Flyers end up being one of the best teams in the NHL throughout the year and throughout these resumption of play at face-offs? But today, the Islanders got the best of them. How'd that happen?
It can happen for a variety of reasons. Sometimes if you have your main face-off guy kicked out of a face-off and somebody else has to take the draw, then it gives you a clear disadvantage. The Flyers usually try to counter this by having two guys who know how to take face-offs on the same line. I don't know if there's a strategic play in that from the Islanders side where they see something on film or anything like that, because there's a lot of players study a lot of film nowadays. So maybe they see something that's a tendency. Maybe they're just doing something that helps them win the draw and get to it faster. I'm not really sure why they would lose the faceoff battle, but I do notice it happening a lot. And there were a handful of moments where you needed a faceoff win and you got it, and several others where you didn't get it. And sometimes that can be the difference between making a quick exit from your own zone when it's a defensive zone faceoff. Sometimes it can be the thing that helps to influence a successful offensive play and lead to a goal. So you definitely need to be better at faceoffs against this team than you were in this game today. And I don't think that that's lost on them. I think that they're a team that typically prides themselves on that percentage that they have. It's one of the tops in the league typically. So I think they'll come back tomorrow with a much better approach to faceoffs for sure. Speaking
of tomorrow, Game 3 tomorrow night here on 97.3 ESPN. I'm sure Kevin's going to have tons of coverage over about it at 97.3ESPN.com. Kevin Durso. Follow on Twitter at Kevin_Durso, our Flyers insider. So what are you looking for adjustment-wise from Vigneault? Because we know that win or lose, this guy is willing to make adjustments. And I have to think that after that third period, he's got to be looking around like, all right, how did we go from playing so great in the first period to having those lapses in judgment in the third?
Yeah, I think what he's going to have to do at this point, he doesn't have to do too much from a strategic standpoint. I think you started to find a formula that works to beat the Islanders, and realistically, even halfway through that third period, you were playing the shutdown style that you want to see that can help you win games. I mean, honestly, if they would have continued to do that throughout the third period like they had against a lot of other teams, they did it several times against Montreal, obviously, but they did it against all three of the other round-robin teams, then they could have come out of this on the other side with a 3-1 win and walked away comfortably and tied the series, and we'd be probably having a different conversation. But I think what you need to do, and I think it's an important thing that he said about this situation, is that he just mentioned in his press conference not too long ago, he doesn't remember, after the series against Montreal, he had told the team after the third period today that he doesn't remember coaching a series in the playoffs in his entire coaching career, which spans 17 years, where you have a playoff series where you didn't go to overtime at some point. So it does happen. These games are tight. And I think that what the message there was is it's about the will to win. You need to outwill other teams. And I think the Flyers were not the team that not only had the momentum, but they were the team that just wasn't carrying the better of the play. They were the team that didn't seem to want it as much as the Islanders did in that third period. And that's why it felt like the Islanders were going to take this game. And you saw the Flyers come out in overtime and look like they wanted it and find a way. And I think that goes a long way going into tomorrow, that the fact that it's a quick turnaround, I'm sure Barry Trotz is preparing his team in the same way, saying, maybe they let an opportunity get away in this game that they could be up 2-0. Now you're back tied in a series. You're going to play a game 5 on Monday next week, and you've got a shot now to have to come back really quickly, and you can erase that loss and have the same kind of bounce back game. Elaine Vigneault's probably telling his team to run with this, to take that win, take the momentum from coming back from losing that lead, and build on it, and take it to take this to the next level. Keep trying to take this to the next level. That's what they've kept talking about, is that there's another level to reach. And that first period looked like signs of that next level. Now they need to build on that even further, put it into a complete game, and perhaps that can give them a series lead if they show that in Game 3 tomorrow.
He's Kevin Durso. Again, follow him on Twitter at Kevin_Durso. Check out all of his Flyers coverage at 973ESPN.com. And he joined us on the Boardwalk on the hotline here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Kevin, appreciate the analysis, and I'm sure we'll be basically keeping our fingers crossed for not another overtime game tomorrow night. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Josh. Appreciate it.
Josh and a Game Night here on 97.3 ESPN. Game Night being brought to you by Matt Black Kia. Matt Black Kia wants to get you approved today. That's Matt Black Kia on the Black Horse Pike in Egg Harbor Township. It is a Wednesday here on Game Night, so it's a Weinberg Wednesday. Dave Weinberg will join me coming up next. Talk some Eagles and some news in the local area about what could be happening at Boardwalk Hall. And, of course, text board is open, 609-403-0973, theplaysugarhouse.com. Text board is open for you to get in the conversation, 609-403-0973. And we will touch on, before we get out of here, the news about the NBA playoffs being postponed as of right now due to the decision earlier in the day by the Milwaukee Bucks to boycott their game in protest of the Jacob Blake shooting situation over in Wisconsin. We'll talk about the ramifications of that about 20 minutes from now. But next, Dave Weinberg to talk Eagles and more right here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Back here on Game Night, it is a Wednesday. You know what that means. We have Dave Weinberg, veteran Eagles beat writer, also covered the local area for high school sports, Hall of Fame boxing writer, and more, joining us on the Boardwalk on the hotline here on 97.3 ESPN. Always appreciate Dave jumping on the show. Dave, how is Wednesday treating you today?
Oh, terrific. Just got done finished with a little beach time, so it was great.
So one of the things I want to touch on with you today about the Eagles, and I'm very curious your perspective on this, because, as we're progressing closer and closer to the start of the season, one of the things I'm observing, because I'm also consuming the Hard Knocks episodes where they're showing the Chargers and the Rams and what it's like for them in their environments at camp in this, 2020 world that we're living in of this pandemic. And I find it interesting that the Eagles have been able to avoid some of the more serious issues that other teams around the league have been facing, and I want to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, they've done a very good job of containing everything, kind of in their own special little bubble, if you will. They took the challenge head on, establishing protocols. Safety first, and making sure everybody was safe and healthy. They had a couple of positive tests early on, but everybody was asymptomatic and was able to come back relatively quickly. And so, they're I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's their medical staff or just their determination and their insistence of staying together. Now, from what I can gather, maybe most of the veterans are staying in the team hotel now instead of going home after practices. At least they're in training camp, and now that everybody's together, maybe that's a factor.
I also got to think about the fact that, we've talked about the importance of Doug Pederson and his role as the head coach of the organization, and I can't get out of my head the video I saw of Andy Reid on the first day of Chiefs training camp, where he came out and said, look, the team that's the most disciplined and stays together is the team that's going to win a championship this year. And I feel like with Doug, listening to him in the media Zoom pressers and observing how this team is going about their business, it feels like, for lack of a better term, the apple hasn't fallen far from the Andy Reid tree here.
Yeah, it hasn't. Doug grew up as both as a player and a coach under Andy Reid, really, and was his first quarterback in Philadelphia in 1999, and came back as an assistant and followed him to Kansas City. And he kind of follows Andy Reid's playbook, if you will, when it comes to coaching, and it's really rubbed off. He's a stickler for details. Relies very strongly on his veteran leadership to handle any problems or whatever, and he's a hands-on kind of coach. People might know him more for his play calling and stuff like that, but he's very much involved in all aspects of the team. His thumbprint is very much on this Eagles organization.
Speaking of thumbprint, I think one guy there's been a lot of questions about coming into the season is Andre Dillard. And if we go by what Doug said, he's very impressed with him. The Eagles are saying that he came in and put on a good amount of muscle during the offseason, which was important for a guy who, let's be realistic, when he came out of college, he wasn't really in an offense that was really a pro-style type offense. So it was important for him to really add some size at left tackle. And with that in mind, Dave, what is your thoughts on Andre Dillard coming into this season?
I had pretty high expectations for him. I thought he approached the offseason the right way, both mentally and physically. From up and reading from tweets and stuff of the beat writers that are actually at training camp practices, it seems like he's been a bit inconsistent. I know there was a incident today where he kind of got pushed back into Carson Wentz's legs. Fortunately, nothing serious happened or anything, but I know he's very hard on himself. Seems to get frustrated when he makes a mistake, which is good. I mean, you want a guy who is willing to work hard and try to get better, and gets mad when things don't go his way. So it's a little bit inconsistent, but hopefully he'll be able to show the form that that shows why they drafted him in the first round last year. Once the season starts.
You mentioned the fact of how hard he is on himself. Something you and I have touched on before is about the culture that has been built in the Eagles organization. And I heard an interview with someone, Brett Veach. He used to work with the Eagles years ago, and he talked about how the thing he learned from Andy Reid and the Eagles and Howie Roseman is about how it's important to have a certain type of player in an organization. I have to think that the Eagles must have drafted him knowing, Dillard, that he was the kind of guy that wasn't just going to settle or going to be a guy who's just going to be like, I'm good enough, that he was going to be hard on himself. They felt that was something they could work with him on.
Yeah, they do a very good job of doing their homework in most cases, making sure that the guy has the right frame of mind, the right work ethic, the right background, emotional and mental strength to go with the physical strength before they're going to bring him in as a draft pick or even as a free agent. They've obviously made some mistakes along the way, but by and large, they have a certain blueprint for what they're looking for in a player and as a player and a person from a guy that's coming in. And Andre definitely seems to fit that mold that they're looking for.
Dave Weinberg joining us here on a Weinberg Wednesday here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Make sure you're following him on Twitter at Dave Weinberg19. You also can check out his extra point columns at 97.3ESPN.com. Dave, I want to flip it over to the defense because I heard a very interesting comment over the weekend. Derek Gunn, a guy who's also covered the team for a long time, mentioned that Avonte Maddox, that this is his job to win or lose. And that comment really stood out to me. I want to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it seems like Jim Schwartz has made that pretty clear that, Avonte is the guy who's going to be with Darius Slay on the outside. Sidney Jones has been hampered by some injuries here in training camp, which certainly doesn't help his cause. And, if Sidney's going to play at all, it's probably going to be in the slot. And, Avonte has done nothing to suggest that he's not, up to the challenge of being that starting outside corner. And Jim Schwartz seems to have a whole lot of confidence in him.
It's an incredible contrast between Maddox and Jones because Jones was coming out of college, and before he got the Achilles tear, he was regarded one of the best prospects coming out. Avonte Maddox, they said he was too small and he might not be big enough. And it seems like both players have had completely different journeys, and they were both drafted around the same point in the draft, different years.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Sidney came in with everybody thought he was a first-round pick, and they thought the Eagles got a steal in the second round because of his Achilles issues. He was supposed to blossom into this, all-pro, Pro Bowl level corner, and it just hasn't happened. I mean, injuries have set him back. Inconsistency has set him back. He just hasn't been able to live up to the potential. He showed some flashes last year. A play here, a play there, but he hasn't been able to string together like an entire game, even let alone a season that justifies the pick. But however, Avante has taken the bull by the horns, if you will. As soon as he got in here, he's played some safety. He's played on the outside. He's played some nickel, and he's just one of those guys who always seems to be around the ball. He's a guy with a nose for the football, and that's something that you really can't teach a lot of guys. And he's made the most of his opportunities and continues to do so.
Dave, I want to touch on a couple of non-Eagles topics with you as well, and I wanted to start with this story about potentially a Big Ten bubble at Boardwalk Hall. For those who didn't see the story, they could check it out at 97.3 ESPN.com. But basically, Atlantic City's Boardwalk Hall could be a site for the Big Ten to play college football in the winter. What they would do is they would use potentially the proposal, for those who don't know, is Boardwalk Hall, Indianapolis's Dome Stadium, Detroit's Dome Stadium, potentially Minnesota's Dome Stadium to play college football in the winter. So what makes Boardwalk Hall, aside from its proximity, an option for them to do this?
Honestly, I don't know that it does. It would be terrific if it could happen, but I don't think it's big enough anymore. If you look at all the photos that have accompanied these stories, they're all from like 1970s, early 1980s, when the hall could seat 25,000 people. Had no problem fitting a 100-yard field in there. As a matter of fact, when I was a young teenager, I remember going to see the Boardwalk Bowl between University of Delaware and CW Post, because a Lower Cape May guy, Larry Washington, was the kicker for the Blue Hens, and CW Post had this hotshot quarterback named Gary Wishard, who went on to become a famous agent. And the Holy Spirit in Atlantic City used to play there all the time on Thanksgiving. But now they underwent a renovation around 2000, 2001, and the seating capacity was reduced to about 14,000, maybe a little more for football. But as you saw from the Arena League being there, they had a tough time squeezing a 50-yard field in there. So I just don't see how the dimensions of the Boardwalk Hall are going to be big enough to fit a Big Ten football game in there.
We know that when the Big Ten played their game at Wrigley Field, that they ended up playing actually one direction because the one end zone was too short, and they were worried about the players crashing into the ivy at Wrigley Field. So
right.
Is that even an option in Boardwalk Hall, or is it just at a point right now because of the renovations that the sizing and the dimensions are just maybe not doable at all?
I don't know. I'm thinking back to when the Blackjacks played there, and there was a little bit of room behind the end zones, but it was a 50-yard field. I can't see where they're going to fit, that much yardage. I don't see how it could happen. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully they'll have a way to figure it out, but I just can't see how that's how it's going to be configured to where they'd be able to fit a regulation football field in there.
Would it be maybe one of those situations where they just, quote unquote, find a way because they know how big of a deal this is?
It's possible. On the one end, you're going to have the stage back there. You can't get rid of that. So I guess they're going to have to find a way to lengthen the other end of the arena. And don't get me wrong, I would love to see it. I mean, I think that'd be so cool. There's never been a big major college football conference or game really played there. The fact that the Big Ten is even considering it is really exciting. But I'm not an architect, but I don't really know how they're going to be able to figure it out.
And one more day before I let you go. Obviously, New Jersey news happening over the weekend in the fight world. Frankie Edgar wins again at another weight class. I know you've watched this guy multiple times. I've watched him a few different times in person. it seems like no matter what, this guy is just an incredible warrior. And it's really apropos for, people talk about, Jersey tough. I feel like Frankie Edgar in many ways embodies that Jersey tough mentality.
Oh, yeah, he has since he was a wrestler in Tom's River and competing at Boardwalk Hall in the high school championships. He's just one of those guys. I mean, there's guys who are bigger, who are more, who are stronger, more well-rounded, but he just has that innate toughness in him and has worked incredibly hard over the years to develop more of an all-around game. And, it's paid dividends for him. I mean, for him to go through 3 weight classes really and excel is just fantastic. And he has a tremendous following in New Jersey, as you probably know. He fought in Boardwalk Hall a couple of years ago, and the people packed the place. And it's great that good things happen to good people once in a while, and he's definitely one of those.
He's Dave Weinberg. He's also a good people as well. Joins us every Wednesday for Weinberg Wednesday here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Again, follow him on Twitter at Dave Weinberg19. Veteran Eagles beat writer, of course, covered high school sports, Hall of Fame boxing writer, and more. He's got all kinds of great stuff on his Twitter feed at Dave Weinberg19. Extra point columns at 973ESPN.com. Always appreciate the time and the conversation, Dave.
Oh, thanks, Josh. Oh, and real quick, I just wanted to thank everyone for their response to the column I did a couple of days ago about playing golf with an 80-year-old man who had just lost his wife and was going through some tough times, and he poured his heart out to me, and it really touched me, and it touched a lot of people who read about it. So I just wanted to thank everybody for taking the time to read it.
Well, I will say this. I'll echo what somebody else told you on Twitter, and that is I think you have the groundwork for a book there. So,
maybe. You never know.
All right, Dave. Take care. We'll catch you next week.
All right, Josh. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. We'll check in on the PlaySugarHouse.com. Text board 609-403-0973 on the other side as we wrap up a condensed show with the Flyers winning in overtime. We're glad the Flyers won. We're still here to talk about it. We'll talk about the Eagles and much more each and every night here on Game Night. Josh Hennig hanging out with you on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Game Night here on a Wednesday. Thanks again to Dave Weinberg and Kevin Durso for joining us here on 97.3 ESPN, being brought to you by GMS Law. Make the right call. With 4 convenient locations to serve you. Visit them online at gmslaw.com. We'll check out the text board right now, 609-403-0973. Get on the PlaySugarHouse.com text board, 609-403-0973. Just a couple minutes left here in the show. Mike from EHT chimed in and said, Josh, my dad took me to see Temple football, Boardwalk Hall back in the day. It's doable. Listen, Mike, I hear you. And it's a balancing act because Dave Weinberg is a guy who's been in Boardwalk Hall probably more than almost anybody else in South Jersey to cover events and just for various things because of how many years he's worked in the area and lived in the area as well. Dave is a lifer of South Jersey. He's not some guy who happened to move into the area. No, he's a South Jersey lifer. So I would say that Dave Weinberg has been in that building probably more than almost anybody else, at least that I know of. And I just have to think that, at least in my opinion, Mike and EHT, I hear what Dave's saying. I hear what you're saying. I just feel like there's a middle ground because if there's an opportunity for the city to make some money, there's an opportunity for there to be some big-time football there. We know that New Jersey has decreasing COVID-19 numbers. We know that it looks like things are moving in the right direction and things to get back to some sort of normalcy, at least in the near future. The hope would be maybe if you have these football games there and maybe December through March or January through March kind of schedule, it might be a great opportunity to, inflood some extra, money into the area that was lost due to the pandemic. So I'm keeping my hopes up. I'm trying to stay positive, but I hear what Dave's saying. There's a lot of issues that to be worked through because of the dimensions of the building after the remodeling. Before we get out of here, I did want to not overlook the fact that you will not be hearing Lakers versus Blazers tonight on 97.3 ESPN. For those who didn't know, because maybe you're watching the Flyers game or listening to it here on 97.3 ESPN with Tim Saunders and Steve Coates. We'll be back on the action tomorrow night, 7 p.m. on 97.3 ESPN. The Milwaukee Bucks game was postponed. The Bucks boycotted the game. Now, the reports are coming out that while the Bucks were in the locker room boycotting the game, they were actually on a conference call with Wisconsin Attorney General Josh Call and Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes. So they weren't just boycotting the game for the sake of boycotting. They were actually trying to see if they could do something about this situation with Jacob Blake, who was shot in the back by the police over there in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And I'm just going to put this out there. This is going to be a very fluid situation because if other sports and other teams decide to go down this domino effect, you're going to potentially have to face in the mirror, for sports at least, an issue, which is you came back during this pandemic to make sure you didn't lose billions of dollars. How much are you willing to sacrifice of that money and the future profitability of these professional sports? This conversation is going to have to be had over the next 36 hours. I'm Josh Hennig. This is Game Night. Catch you tomorrow.